The bell above the cafe door chimed softly every time someone came in, but on Christmas Eve it felt heavier, like it carried the weight of everyone's hopes and disappointments. Snow pressed itself against the windows, melting into thin, trembling lines as the warmth inside fought the cold outside. The cafe smelled of burnt espresso, cinnamon, and something close to loneliness. Most tables were full, yet the room felt strangely quiet, the kind of quiet that exists when people are lost in their own thoughts rather than conversation. If you have ever had a moment where one small event changed everything, stay with this story until the end, because what happened in this cafe would change several lives forever. Maya tied her apron tighter around her waist and forced a smile she no longer felt. She was 26, working her second double shift in a row, her feet aching and her head pounding. Christmas Eve was supposed to be busy, joyful, full of tips and laughter. Instead, it had been filled with complaints, rushed orders, and customers snapping at her like she was part of the furniture. She had been fired 3 days before Christmas from her last job due to cutbacks, and this cafe job was the only thing standing between her and missing rent. Her mom was sick back home, her savings were gone, and the future felt like a locked door she didn't have the key to. At the corner table sat a man who had been there for almost an hour. He looked out of place in a quiet way. Early 30s, worn jacket, careful eyes. Across from him sat a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, swinging her legs under the table, humming softly to herself while coloring on a napkin with crayons the cafe provided. The man kept glancing at his phone, then at the door, as if waiting for something that might not arrive. Maya noticed him because he was polite. He said thank you. He stacked his plates neatly when he was done. In a room full of noise, kindness stood out. The trouble started when the cafe manager, Rick, stormed out from behind the counter. Rick was known for his temper, especially when stress took over. Holiday rushes made him worse. A customer had just complained that Maya's smile wasn't friendly enough. Another said her coffee was too cold, even though it wasn't. Rick didn't ask questions. He didn't listen. He pointed at Maya in front of everyone and told her she was done. Fired. Right there. On Christmas Eve. The words hit harder than any shout. Fired. Just like that. Maya felt the room spin. Her cheeks burned as every conversation around her slowed, eyes turning toward her. She tried to speak, to explain, but her throat closed. Rick told her to take off her apron and leave. No apology. No private conversation. Just humiliation. Maya untied her apron with shaking hands. She folded it carefully, because it was the only thing she could control in that moment. Her vision blurred, but she refused to cry in front of everyone. She walked toward the back, grabbed her coat, and headed for the door. The bell chimed again, sharper this time, like it was marking something important. As she passed the corner table, the little girl looked up. "Daddy," she whispered, loud enough to carry, "why is that lady sad?" The man followed his daughter's gaze. He saw Maya's red eyes, her clenched jaw, the way she held herself together with sheer will. He didn't answer right away. Something in him shifted, something deep and familiar. Loss recognized loss. "Excuse me," he said, standing up. His chair scraped softly against the floor. The entire cafe seemed to hold its breath as he spoke. "Is there a problem here?" Rick rolled his eyes. "Company business," he snapped. "Not your concern." The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply looked at Maya. "Did you do something wrong?" Maya shook her head, barely. "I tried my best," she said, her voice small but steady. The man nodded. Then he turned to Rick. "I'd like to pay for everyone's meals here today." A murmur rippled through the cafe. Rick's attitude changed instantly. "Well, that's very generous of you," he said, forcing a smile. "But," the man continued, "only if you apologize to her. Publicly. And give her her job back." Rick laughed, sharp and uncomfortable. "You don't tell me how to run my cafe." The man reached into his wallet and placed a card on the table. "Then you should know who you're talking to. My name is Daniel Carter. I own this building." Silence fell like snow. Rick's face drained of color. He stammered, trying to recover, but the damage was done. Daniel's eyes were calm, but there was steel behind them. "I inherited this property from my father," Daniel said quietly. "I've been watching how it's managed." What I saw tonight tells me everything I need to know. Rick was fired before Maya could even process what was happening. Daniel turned to Maya. I'm sorry this happened to you, he said. No one deserves that, especially not tonight. Maya finally broke. Tears slipped down her face, not from sadness alone, but from relief. From being seen. That wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Daniel and his daughter, Lily, walked Maya home that night because the snow was falling harder and buses were delayed. On the way, Maya learned that Daniel was a single dad. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier from a sudden illness. Christmas had been difficult ever since. Lily missed her mother terribly, and Daniel carried guilt like a second coat, heavy and always present. Over the next few weeks, Daniel kept his promise. He shut down the cafe temporarily and reopened it under new management. He offered Maya a position, not just as a server, but as a supervisor. At first, she thought it was charity. He corrected her gently. It's trust, he said. You earned it. Maya worked harder than she ever had. She treated every customer with patience, every coworker with respect. She remembered what it felt like to be humiliated, and she promised herself no one under her watch would feel that way again. Slowly, the cafe became something different. Warmer, kinder, a place where people stayed a little longer than necessary. Daniel and Maya grew closer, not in a dramatic way, but in quiet moments. Shared coffee after closing, conversations about loss, fear, and hope. Lily adored Maya, often insisting she sit with them during breaks. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something like peace. For the first time in months, Maya felt something like stability. On the next Christmas Eve, the cafe was full again. But this time, laughter filled the air. The bell above the door chimed with joy instead of tension. Maya stood behind the counter, confident and calm. Daniel and Lily sat at the same corner table, watching her. Daniel stood up once more. Not to confront, but to thank. He raised his glass and told the story of a woman who was fired on Christmas Eve, and how standing up for her reminded him what kind of man he wanted to be, and what kind of world he wanted his daughter to grow up in. Maya looked around the room, at faces smiling back at her, and understood something powerful. One moment of kindness can echo far beyond a single night. One decision to stand up can change everything. If this story touched your heart, remember that kindness costs nothing, but it can give someone everything. Support stories like this by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who needs hope today. Sometimes, all it takes is one person standing up to turn a silent Christmas Eve into a miracle.